What's happening, YouTubers? Thank you for coming back for another lens talk video. Today we are discussing and talking about the Fujinon 16-55mm f 2.8, and is this a worthy upgrade to the 18-55mm Fujinon kit lens? So before we start, I want to thank you guys for all the new subscriptions to the channel, or the new subscribers. I want to thank you for getting involved with the last video, which was the X-T2, X-Pro 2 and AF tracking with Amin, the runner. I want to encourage you to keep on commenting and helping people if they have questions. I will always respond back to genuine questions as much as I can. So without further ado, let's start talking about this lens. As usual, I will be giving you the positives, followed by the negatives, followed by what I use this lens for, and bear in mind, it's my personal opinion. I'm not right, I'm not wrong. It's my personal opinion. And I am going to start off with the build quality of this lens. So, this lens is a tank of a lens. It almost feels like if I was to pull this out of my bag, accidentally drop it, it will probably end up cracking the pavement before it cracks the lens. I've never tried it. I don't encourage you to try it. Excuse me. But it is a weighty tank of a lens. Construction is both metal and plastic. The plastic feels more like metal, but I'm pretty sure it's not a metal, it's just a very high grade, good quality plastic. The focus ring is also metal, followed by a nice big rubber zoom ring. And obviously the hood is plastic. In terms of the aperture control ring, it's got, you can hear that there, an awesome click to it. It's a lot better than the older or the first generation lenses that came out, like the 23mm 1.4 and the 35mm 1.4. It's kind of an in-between between this and the new f2 versions. It's not quite as stiff as the f2 version, but it definitely is a lot stiffer. And I have no concerns about pulling this out of my bag, and the aperture has moved. In fact, it's pretty stiff, and it's not happened to me where I've pulled it out and it's moved to what I wanted it, or from what I wanted it to. So weight, 655 grams. Comparing it to the Tamron 24-70, which was my go-to lens before I switched out to Fuji from Canon, that was an 825 grams in weight. And when you compare the two, this feels so much more solid. You know, hands down, it's a lot more solid. Another positive is this is a weather sealed lens. So if you have an X-Pro 2 or an X-T2, then you have a weather sealed camera. Obviously, weather sealed is subject to debate. I have never had an issue or worried about using my gear in a light downpour. However, I wouldn't use it in a crazy tropical storm unless there were some seriously good shots, and then that's down to my risk if I choose to do that, and chances are I would do that. It's my risk, it's my gear, and if I want the shot, I'll try and get that shot. Another positive is the image quality is really, really sharp. It's a lot sharper than the Tamron 24-70 that I previously had, and I find sharpness is good not only from the center but corner to corner, even at f2.8. Now, I don't like to talk about specs, but I will talk about a few specs because I know people like to hear the specs. The lens itself has a 9 rounded aperture blades, 77mm filter thread, so it's not too bad when you are buying like ND filters or UV filters. They're not obviously going to be as cheap as the smaller lenses that we're used to from the Fuji lineup, so it's not that expensive when you want to get filters. I would say it's in the middle, middle of the road, not as cheap as the smaller lenses, but certainly not as expensive as your bigger lenses. Autofocus acquisition on this lens is brilliant, really, really quick. It is snappy, it snaps. I think this is probably one of the fastest lenses that I've used. It certainly is up there with the new f2 23mm and 35mm, which we know are really, really fast. I know the 90mm f2 is crazy fast. I haven't compared it to that. I'm not sure if it's as fast as that, but this is well and truly fast enough. Negatives. There's only one negative to this lens, and that is it isn't image stabilized. I find that a bit of a negative, or I found that a bit of a negative, because I came from a lens that had IS or OS or VR or whatever you want to call it. However, I've changed my shooting style just to make sure that when I'm using this lens, I shoot from 1/100th or 1/125th, just so I don't introduce any type of movement blur or motion blur. And it's fine, you know, I haven't really had any issues with it. Would I have liked it to have some sort of image stabilization? Of course I would have done. So what do I use this lens for? I use this lens actually for everything. Being an equivalent of a 24-82.5mm, it's actually got more reach than a full frame 24-70. So I actually use this for street photography sometimes. I use this for landscape shots. 24mm is plenty wide. Of course it's not as wide as, you know, something like a 12mm or a 10mm, but it definitely is wide enough, and if you're framing certain things in a distance, you can do it pretty well with this lens. I use it for fast moving or fast paced events, things like weddings, christenings. This lens can cope absolutely brilliantly well with it. Really don't have an issue with it tracking or keeping up with anything. So I use it for more or less everything. I don't shy away using this lens. If I need to get this sort of focal range, I'll pick up this lens. I'm so confident that this lens can do what I need it to do. So the 18-55, 2.8 to f4. Is this a worthy upgrade to that lens? Yes and no. And again, I'm not sitting on the fence here, but I want to be honest with you because people do different types of shooting. That 18-55 is a brilliant little lens. And in terms of size, it's far more practical if you're doing things like travel photography, or you want to just take one lens out, and it could probably cover more or less the zoom range that you probably would require, especially for travel photography. However, where this is better is obviously the constant f2.8. So Again, when you are, for instance, doing events, you know that the f2.8, and if you want to zoom in or zoom out, it will always stay at 2.8, giving you that extra stop of light, which will in turn keep your ISO down, which in turn you can keep your shutter speed up. So for that, this is definitely a workhorse of a lens. I'm not saying you couldn't do that with the 18-55. However, I think you would struggle at f4 in a dark environment to keep your ISO down to what I would class or call respectable, where you'll get decent images from. Secondly, obviously this is a 16-55mm versus an 18-55mm. So those few extra millimeters do give you a wider angle of view. So again, for things like landscapes, or even in tight spots, like if you're photographing people getting ready at an event, then you've got a little bit more scope to zoom out with. But the truth of the matter is, I don't think I would own this lens if I didn't need it for client work. I think, to be fair, the landscape shooting I do with it is always shot more or less at f8, 5.6, so that wouldn't make a difference with the 18-55. Also, the 18-55 is obviously image stabilized as well, so that's a bonus. The only difference is for landscape shooting, yes, this is a couple of millimeters wider. Is it really that much wider? Not really. So it swings and roundabouts. But I do love this lens. I certainly recommend this lens if you are earning money from your photography. And it really is this lens that you need, in my opinion, for paid jobs. All in all, this is a fantastic lens. I cannot rave more about this lens. I love the images you get from it. I love the way it handles flare. I love the build quality of this lens. Comparing it to full frame equivalents, I love the difference in the weight. The weight always is going to play a factor when it comes to crop versus full frame. And if you are earning money from your photography and you need this sort of focal length, I think, in my opinion, it's definitely worth the upgrade from the 18-55. If you are not earning money from your photography and you feel you want this lens, get this lens. It's not just for paid jobs, absolutely not. You can use this lens for, you know, a lot of other things, including travel photography, obviously. The only drawback is it's heavier, and do you want to carry that around with you? That's down to you. That is your choice. So I am going to show you some images right now. These are just a random amount of images, personal work, a few client images from it as well. And if you like this video, please stay tuned, keep subscribed, subscribe if you're not a subscriber, and I'll see you guys real soon. Cheers, bye.